Whilst world football's governing body can be lauded for its role in growing the sport across the globe, FIFA is an organisation that has long been riddled with corruption and synonymous with scandal. From awarding the 1934 World Cup to fascist Italy so Benito Mussolini could weaponise and fix only the second World Cup finals as he pleased, to the farce of the 1982 disgrace of Gijón, and right up to the forthcoming 2022 World Cup in Qatar, where foreign construction workers building the stadiums are essentially locked in serfdom, living in squalor, and all too often dying on the job in the searing desert heat. These are all disgraces that will forever tarnish FIFA as an organisation, but one of FIFA's most shameful, yet less talked about acts, came back in 1973. By the 1970s, FIFA's showpiece event, the World Cup, had become a global phenomenon. The 1970 World Cup, which culminated in Pelé and Brazil lifting their third Jules Rimet trophy in sensational fashion, had been the first World Cup to be broadcast in colour. FIFA were keen to capitalise on this fresh wave of popularity with the 10th edition of the finals in 1974, which headed to Germany, or West Germany to be more specific, for the first time. The World Cup qualifiers threw up some real surprises, with a long list of big hitters like England, France, Mexico, Spain, Portugal, Belgium and Czechoslovakia all missing out. By September 1973, 15 of the 16 nations who would be at the 1974 World Cup had been confirmed, with the only exception being the spot awarded to the winner of the Interconfederation playoff game between Chile and the Soviet Union. The Soviets had topped Group 9 of their UEFA qualification process ahead of France and the Republic of Ireland. Meanwhile, Chile had already had to win the CONMEBOL playoff game against Peru in order to reach the Interconfederation playoff. It would be a two-legged tie, the first leg played in Moscow and the second in Santiago, with the Soviets appearing to be the favourites. They had reached at least the quarter-final stage of the last 4 World Cups, meanwhile Chile hadn't reached the tournament's knockout stages since the 1962 finals in which they had hosted. As well as the importance of qualifying for the World Cup, the games between Chile and the Soviet Union were incredibly politically charged. In 1973, the Cold War was still close to boiling point in terms of the tensions between the Soviet Union and the United States. Following the signing of the Paris Peace Accords, US troops were being withdrawn from Vietnam, heralding victory for the Communist Party of Vietnam and humiliation for the United States. In Africa, the soon-to-be murderous despot Idi Amin completed a successful coup in Uganda with the support of the United States and the United Kingdom, although he would later turn his back on his Western allies. And between the first and second leg of Chile and the Soviet Union's Interconfederation playoff, the Yom Kippur War in the Middle East, in which the United States and the Soviet Union backed the opposing forces significantly, had seen the US Armed Forces Nuclear Alert state reach DEFCON 3 for the first time since the Cuban Missile Crisis. In 1970, the US and the USSR had further looked to exert their influence upon the democratic elections in Chile. Yes, that's right, I'm sorry to inform you that foreign interference in domestic elections is nothing new. Through covert CIA and KGB operations and heavy funding, the world's two superpowers fought to put more US or USSR-friendly candidates into office. The CIA's preferred candidate was the Christian Democratic Party leader, Radomir Tomic, but they didn't direct their campaign in favour of any one candidate, but instead focused all their efforts on anti-Salvador Allende propaganda. The KGB, meanwhile, had been more precise in their support, looking to put Allende in office. Unlike in 1964, the CIA were unable to swing the election in favour of the pro-US candidate, and Chile elected Salvador Allende, the nation's first Marxist leader. Nixon was said to be furious about Allende's ascent to power and the CIA's failed attempts to foil his election bid, but the US didn't stop there, instead turning their attention to brewing anti-Allende discontent in the nation. Many of Allende's socialist reforms proved popular with the people of Chile, but not the more right-wing military, which Allende could never quite assume full control of. In August 1973, Augusto Pinochet became the new commander-in-chief of the Chilean army, and within a month, he assumed power thanks to a successful coup d'etat. Pinochet's coup had been a violent one, but not nearly as violent as his early years in office. The military commander turned Chile into a military junta and began eliminating any known opposition by force. A reign of fear and terror began in Chile, of which Chile's national football stadium, the Estadio Nacional, was at the epicenter. Internment and concentration camps were set up to carry out depraved physical, sexual and mental abuse. As many as 80,000 people, including leftists, socialists and political critics, were held captive and either tortured, executed or both. The Estadio Nacional was the largest of these prisons or torture camps, holding up to 40,000 people in total, and an estimated 7,000 at a single point at its peak. Men were detained on the pitch and in the stands, whilst women were held in the swimming pool changing rooms and associated buildings. A number of prisoners were executed at the stadium, whilst others were taken to separate facilities to be killed. It was upon this backdrop that the Soviet Union faced Chile for a place at the 1974 World Cup, so this matchup had implications far beyond the world of football. There were doubts about whether the first leg in Moscow would even go ahead, as Pinochet had banned all Chileans from leaving the country, never mind travelling to what was the heartland of communism. There were further complications for Pinochet, who knew a couple of the Chilean players had been close to the Allende government and unfavourable towards the coup, but he also had to project an image of normality to the rest of the world. With their relatives under military surveillance and under strict instructions that they were to make no political statements, the Chile team travelled to Moscow to face a Soviet side who had reached the final of the European Championships only 2 years earlier. It was an incredibly tense affair, coming literally just 2 weeks after the coup, with the Soviets not recognising the new government and severing all diplomatic ties with Chile. With the news that the Chilean players would be making the journey, the Soviet Union even considered detaining the Chilean team upon their arrival and using them as a bargaining chip to persuade Pinochet to release political prisoners. They didn't do that, and perhaps unsurprisingly, given events off the pitch, the game was a cagey affair which ended in a 0-0 draw at the Central Lenin Stadium, now known as the Luzhniki Stadium. The result was viewed as a humiliation for the Soviets and a major success for the less fancy Chileans, who now only had to beat the USSR in a one-off game on home soil in order to reach the finals. The second leg was scheduled to be played 2 months on from the first, in November 1973. By this stage, there had been no let-up in Pinochet's depravity and human rights violations, and nor had there been a relaxation in tensions between the two nations. The Estadio Nacional was still being used as an internment camp, running at close to capacity, with dissidents still being executed at the ground. The Soviet Union demanded that the game be played at a neutral venue, a proposal that was actually supported by the Football Federation of Chile, but not by Pinochet. He wanted to keep up the international pretense of normality and legitimacy, whilst also scoring a PR victory by defeating the Soviet Union, and by extension communism, on home soil. Incredibly, Chile's insistence that the game should be played at the Estadio Nacional was backed by FIFA and their president, Sir Stanley Roos. Roos, who is among football's longest serving and most important administrators, had a bit of a habit for dreadful decision making. The Englishman, who had been knighted in 1949, was also a supporter of apartheid in South Africa, and had at the very least indirectly supported the segregation of different ethnic groups within South African football during his reign as president of FIFA. Roos would be kicked out in 1974, losing his re-election bid, largely because he was viewed as a racist and FIFA as a racist organisation by the African and Asian nations due to Roos's stance on South Africa. Roos commissioned a FIFA report into the situation in Chile and at the Estadio Nacional specifically, in which delegates travelled to South America in order to determine whether the stadium was fit to hold a crucial World Cup qualifier. With the circa 7,000 detainees moved inside, survivor Gregorio Mena Barales recalled that the commission had, quote, visited the field, walked around the court, looked with distant eyes at the prisoners, and gave the opinion, in the stadium you could play, close quote. It was a shameful decision, and another stain upon an already severely tarnished organisation. For the game itself, the prisoners wouldn't be at the stadium, but nor would the Soviet Union team. Pinochet had his political prisoners transferred to a detention site in the Atacama Desert, meanwhile the Soviet team never left Moscow. They point-blank refused to take part, citing security and political concerns, and sending a letter to FIFA which read simply, quote, for moral considerations, Soviets cannot at this time play at the Stadium of Santiago, splashed with the blood of the Chilean patriots. Close quote. Of course, the Soviets were no strangers to persecuting political opponents themselves, and whether they would have taken a similar stance had it been a conservative government that had been overthrown by a Marxist coup is up for debate. Whether their stance was the result of global geopolitics and self-interest, fear of actually losing the game and a pretty significant global PR end goal, or genuine outrage at what was happening in Chile, their stance was still the correct one, regardless of motive. Almost every nation, government, and regime is splashed with metaphorical blood, but the Estadio Nacional at that time was splashed with literal blood. People were being detained, tortured, and executed on that pitch in the build-up to that game. FIFA's decision that it was a fit environment for a game of football was a truly despicable decision even by their own warped moral standards. With the Soviets refusing to travel, FIFA not only declared a 2-0 walkover and subsequently a safe passage for Chile to the 1974 World Cup, they also bizarrely demanded that the game go ahead without the Soviet team. With 15,000 fans in attendance, the Chilean team passed the ball around for a few moments before Francisco Valdés walked the ball into the net, and Austrian referee Erich Leinmar blew the final whistle after just 30 seconds. The Soviet Union's decision not to travel was supported by the rest of the Eastern Bloc, who criticised FIFA's decision to insist on the game being played in Santiago. That included East Germany, who had qualified for the World Cup in neighbouring West Germany for the first time. The East Germans threatened to withdraw from the competition, which would have caused some headaches for FIFA, with the UEFA qualification process being long finished. In the end, East Germany did compete in the finals, where they were drawn in a group against West Germany, Australia, and, naturally, Chile. Chile drew with East Germany and Australia, but lost to West Germany, and it was the two Germanys who qualified for the knockout stages. The Soviet Union began a period of decline, both on the pitch and ultimately within the Cold War. In 1988, following 16.5 years in office, a referendum was held in Chile on whether the nation wished to have another 8 years with Pinochet as their de facto leader, or whether they wanted to remove the general. By a margin of 56%, the people of Chile chose to remove Pinochet, although he wouldn't step down until 1990. Despite leaving the office of president, Pinochet remained as commander-in-chief of the Chilean army up until 1998. When he retired in 1998, aged 83, Pinochet took up a post as Senator for Life of Chile, as per his own 1980 constitution. However, in October 1998, Pinochet was indicted for human rights violations in Chile by a Spanish magistrate whilst on holiday in London. Following great debate on whether or not to extradite Pinochet to Spain, the British decided not to on medical grounds, and the former president returned to Chile in 2000. Upon his return, Pinochet secured himself immunity from prosecution and a financial allowance in Chile, but the indictments kept coming. Not only was Pinochet a despot who had thousands tortured and executed, he had also become incredibly wealthy in office, and was wanted on charges of tax evasion and embezzlement. In his final years, his legal team fought against conviction on the grounds that Pinochet had dementia and wasn't fit to stand trial. In 2002, Pinochet resigned as senator, and in 2004, Chile's Supreme Court overturned its original ruling and decided that Pinochet should stand trial, by this point aged 87. When questioned by judges as to whether he was the head of Chile's secret police, and as such responsible for the routine use of extreme force and multiple assassinations, Pinochet responded, quote, "I don't remember, but it's not true. And if it were true, I don't remember." Close quote. An innocent man, if I've ever heard one. On his 91st birthday in 2006, Pinochet had his wife read out a statement to his admirers. Within days, he was put back on house arrest, and with 2 new charges added to his enormous charge sheet. Pinochet died 2 weeks later, with around 300 criminal charges still pending, but no convictions having been made. In the streets, opponents of Pinochet's regime celebrated and partied into the night, whilst his supporters grieved outside the hospital in which he had died. In a rather cowardly display of fence-sitting, the Chilean government refused Pinochet a state funeral, but granted him a military funeral. They refused to grant a day of national mourning, but they did authorise for flags at military barracks to be flown at half-staff, and for the Chilean flag to be draped on Pinochet's coffin. That is it for today's video. Thank you all for watching. I sincerely hope you enjoyed it. Give us a like if so, let us know your thoughts in the comments, and as always, feel free to subscribe to HITC 7s.